Hey monsters, thanks for tuning in to Murder News, the true crime cult for the latest breaking news, murdery memes, TV reviews, podcast recommendations, and all things spooky. I'm television's Aurora Katie.
And I'm Angelina. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and recruit all of your friends to join our cult. This is the Week in True Crime.
Murder News. We have a special episode for you today. We are chatting with Kathy Kleiner, who is a survivor of Ted Bundy from his attack on the Chi Omega sorority house in Tallahassee, Florida. On December 30th, 1977, Ted escaped from jail in Glenwood Springs, Colorado for the second time after being charged with Carol Duranche's kidnapping and awaiting trial for Karen Campbell's murder. After escaping, Ted headed east to Ann Arbor, Michigan, Atlanta, Georgia, and then arrived in Tallahassee on June 8th, 1978.
Early in the morning on January 15th, Ted entered the FSU Chi Omega sorority house through a back door of the house with a broken lock, carrying a piece of firewood he found outside. At around 2:45 a.m., he bludgeoned Margaret Bowman to death with a piece of firewood he carried with him and used a nylon to strangle her. He next entered the bedroom of Lisa Levi, bludgeoned her with the firewood, strangled, sexually assaulted her, and bit her, leaving a tooth impression on her buttocks. Ted then entered a bedroom where Kathy Kleiner and Karen Chandler were fast asleep and attacked both of them with the fire log, but both Kathy and Karen survived the brutal attack.
While both Kathy and Karen survived, their lives would of course never be the same. We have Kathy Kleiner here to talk with us about the night she survived, the recovery process, and what she would like to say to her attacker, one of the world's most infamous serial killers. So, Kathy, we'd love it if you could describe from your own perspective what your day was like leading up to and after Ted Bundy's attack at the Chi Omega house.
Okay, the day was Saturday, January 14th. I woke up early in the morning and was hungry, so I went down to the kitchen. I remember I got a bagel with cream cheese and peanut butter, and I took it up to my room and I ate. I remember I listened to Caroline on my mind, and it was a good morning. It was really cold. It was January 14th. It was really cold out and misty. I was going to go to a wedding that day, and it was a friend that I met at a little church I joined called Wesley Chapel. It was a group of friends and a group of students that joined this. It was more of an outlet that we played pool and we talked and, ping pong, and it was a place to get together and just chill. A couple we met there was going to get married at noon on Saturday when I woke up and it was cold and I had my breakfast, and I was very upset because after the wedding at noon, they were going to have a reception outside on the lawn. Since the morning was so bad, I remember praying and said, God, this is so unfair. They want to be outside and, it's terrible weather. And then I forgot about it. And I got dressed. I wore my dark blue corduroy pants and a big woolly sweater. And I was nice and warm. And I walked down to Wesley Chapel, and there were a whole bunch of kids there that knew it was, Sam and Nancy were the couple that were going to get married. They were young, and both of them were students, so it was just a nice group. The wedding at noon was wonderful. It was the church, actually. The church itself was in a round seating, so it was theater in the round, and it was unique to watch with the ceremony being in a round theater. So we enjoyed the ceremony and then walked out to go have the reception on the grass. The sun was shining. It was still cold out, but it wasn't misty. It would turn into the most beautiful afternoon.
Oh.
So that reception was wonderful. Afterwards, a bunch of us went back inside the chapel and played ping pong and pool and watched TV and listened to James Taylor and just had a nice afternoon. We decided as a group later that night to go out and go to a movie or go do something together as a group. So we decided to do that. And I wanted to go back to the Cayo house, which was about 5 blocks from the little chapel. I walked down the street. Now it was cold and misty again. It was around 6:30. I walked into the Cayo house, and there was a bunch of Cayo sisters, and they were talking, and they were in the foyer saying, "Oh, I went shopping today," and telling what they bought. And others were, "Oh, I'm going on a date with this cutest guy tonight," and everything. So I stood there for a while and, interacted with everyone. Then I went upstairs. And when you walked into the Cayo house, big wooden doors were the front doors. And when they opened, it turned into a beautiful foyer. There was a beautiful wooden staircase, and that led to the second floor. I lived on the second floor, was my room. So that night, after talking with everyone, I went upstairs to my room, and I decided to not go out, to stay home and study. I had a calculus test on Monday. So I decided just to stay home that night, and so did my roommate. So we were both in our beds studying, and decided to go to bed around 11:30 that night. When you walk into our bedroom, we were on the second floor of the sorority house. Our window faced the back of the sorority, which was the parking lot. When you walked into our front bedroom door, it mirrored each other on each side of the wall. We had a dresser. Next to that was a desk. And next to that was the footboard of our twin beds. There wasn't much room between each. It was just a couple steps between each. When you looked from our front door to the back of the room, it was a full bank of windows, and the whole wall was windows. So our beds went against the window, and that was our headboard. Our windows were always open, our curtains, because we hung curtains, rods of plants on the curtain rods. I remember we had a macrame hanger. It was an owl. And we had that had a beautiful spider plant that hung from that. In between our beds, we had a small trunk. It was called a footlocker then, and it was maybe about 3 feet by 4 feet long. And that was between our twin beds, which left maybe 4 feet from each side of the bed to the trunk. Our carpet was gold, and our furniture was light brown. So that night, around 11:30, we decided to go to sleep. My roommate and I turned off the lights. We crawled into bed. I had a great yellow flannel nightgown on, and I always wore white socks because it was so cold in the sorority house. So we crawled into bed and went to sleep. I was lying on my left side, sound asleep, and I heard a noise. And this noise was our bedroom door opening and sliding against the carpet. It wasn't a loud sound, but it made me wake up a little bit, and I'm still sleeping. The next thing I heard was this louder sound because the footlocker that was between our beds was kicked. It made a loud sound. We had my glasses and a plant on top of it and books. So now this really woke me up, and I'm trying to focus and see what was there. The room was dark, and as I look and focus my eyes, I see something standing next to my bed. And all I could see was a silhouette. I couldn't make out any features. And as I saw and looked, this person raised his arm way up over his head, and he struck it down on me, on my face, with such force that it broke my jaw in 3 places. it cut my cheek open from my mouth up to my ear, and I almost bit my tongue off, as well as lacerations on my shoulder. At that point, it didn't hurt. The blow felt like more of a thud, of a hit. It didn't hurt though. I rightly passed out at that point. My roommate heard this noise also and heard me, so she woke up, and this person basically just turned around to her side of the bed and hit her as well. She had her arm up to protect herself from the blow because she saw what had happened. So she was trying to protect her face. At this point, I'm awake now, and I'm trying to talk and scream. And I'm screaming as loud as I could, someone help me. So all I was doing was making gurgling sounds because my jaw was shattered and there was so much blood in my mouth that I couldn't vocalize what I wanted to say. So this person came around to my side of the bed and was going to attack me again. He didn't want to leave anyone alive or anyone who could have seen him. So he's on my side of the bed of the room again, and he lifts his arm, and before he could get it up over his head, our room illuminated with a light. It was a bright light that just shone into our room. It was a car that was pulling into the parking lot behind our house, and the light shone up into our bedroom. And I was cringed in a little ball, waiting for the next blow to happen. And I was trying to make myself as small as I could. And even with my eyes scrunched closed, I could see the light in the room. And I opened my eyes a little bit more, and it was a bright light. And the person I saw standing next to me now was kind of antsy and didn't know what to do and was spooked. He turned around and ran out our door. The light then dimmed, and it was all dark again. And I'm scrunched up in my little ball, waiting for him to come back and hit me again. The room grew dark, and I passed out. The next thing I remember is sitting up in my bed and screaming and yelling and asking for help. And again, all I was doing was making gurgling sounds. At this point, my roommate got up out of her bed and walked into the hallway through the door. Sorority sisters were in the hallway and saw her. So she turned her around and turned on our light and walked her back to her bed. They could then see that she was bloodied and her face was messed up. And they saw me on the other side of the room, rocking back and forth, sitting against the wall. And they couldn't believe how badly injured I was. And there were some sorority sisters that just came and put their arms around me and tried to soothe me. Now my face is hurting so bad. It felt like knives and needles and saws and anything you could think of. And it hurt so bad. I remember sitting there and rocking and having them try to take care of me. Someone called 911. First to arrive was a police officer. And I remember he stood next to my bed. I felt a peace. I felt a comfort. Just seeing his face, as scared and as broken and everything I was, I knew that police officer wasn't going to let this person come and hit me again. And as everything is just happening, I remember that just being something in my head that stuck. The next thing I remember were the paramedics coming into my room and attending to me. I was trying to say what happened as best as I could with not being able to speak well. And they said, "It's okay, darling. We're going to take care of you. You've been shot in the face." And at that point, they saw my cheek so wide open, you could see my teeth and everything inside my mouth. And as he said that, I'm thinking, I remember something about being hit, and I don't remember anything about being shot. And I think at that point, I passed out again. The paramedics tended to me as best they could. They put me on the gurney, and they were going to carry me out the front doors. And as they had to carry me down that wooden stairway that went all the way down to the first floor. And they carried me out the doors, and I remember it was so cold. I was freezing, and there were towels and blankets on me, and I was just cold. And I looked up, laying down, and I looked up in the sky, and as I did, I see these heads looking down at me, and there were 4 or 5 heads looking at me. And I didn't know what they were looking at. And I'm thinking, what are they looking at? And I didn't understand. I didn't understand a lot that was happening. And as they carried me to the ambulance, I saw the lights of the police cars and the fire truck and the ambulance and all these lights turning. And I heard people talking and the squawking of the police radios. And in my mind, I was at a carnival. I was somewhere where I wasn't scared. I wasn't hurting. It was somewhere comfortable and good for me to be in. And I was at the carnival. They then took me into the ambulance, and they tended me as best they could. And the police officer rode with me in the ambulance. And as I'm coming and going and them giving me medication, again, that little piece in my heart, I felt safe. I was in the ambulance, and they were attending to me and took me to Tallahassee Memorial Hospital. I remember all the craziness and being cold and going into the ER, and everything's confusing, and I'm hurting and scared. And the police officer was still with me, but I didn't feel comfort anymore. I was just scared and everything going on. And as I'm laying there, they cut my yellow nightgown off. And I remember that was a new nightgown, and I didn't like, it just in my head again, why are they cutting that? And I'm scared. And as I'm looking up, there's this beautiful face looking down at me and smiled. And she was the lady that had gotten married on the Saturday that I went to her wedding. She was a nursing student and worked the ER that night. So I had that smile that wrapped around me, and I was going to be okay again. I was going to be okay. They took me into the OR, and they wired my mouth shut. And the next thing I remember was waking up in my hospital room. I was the only one in there when I first woke up. There was a nurse that came out, in and out, and there was a police officer at my door, sitting there at the hospital door. And I looked around, and I was scared, and my face was all bandaged, and you could only see my eyes. And in a little while, my mom and my dad and my sister and my aunt came into the room because they had just found out, and they had to fly in from Miami. So they got there as soon as they could. And it was such relief to be surrounded by family. Um, it took a while for me to understand that I was in the hospital. And I was so confused, and the police detectives were asking me questions. Who did you see? What do you know? And I didn't know anything. They did hypnotize me when I was in the hospital. Psychiatrists came in and hypnotized me to see if I could come up with any information that would be useful for the police. And I remember talking after they put me under, and I was talking and telling how I heard the door open and how I heard someone trip over the trunk and the light. And I'm thinking, I'm making this up, you know, and I was talking the best I could because my teeth were wired shut. And I remember thinking, I'm making all this up because I didn't remember it. And it's exactly what happened.
Wow.
And this has helped me remember more of the details, but it also opened my mind up to this is what happened. This is what happened to me that night.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I was released from the hospital about a week later. I was to be taken to the airport and flown back to Miami with my family on a little airplane. Before they took us to the airport, I remember there was 2 police cars that drove us, and they stopped in front of the Chemo house, and they wanted me to go into the room and look and see if anything had been stolen. Because if they found something in whomever they find as a possible person who did this, and they found my things in their possession, then they would know it was them in the room.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to go. This is a week after the attack.
Right.
And they opened the doors, and that beautiful wooden staircase wasn't so pretty anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a police officer on each elbow helping me go step by step up to the 2nd floor and turn the corner to the hallway. When we were in the hallway, the first room to my left was Margaret Bowman's room. The second room on my right was Lisa Levy's room. Our room was next, which was right next to Margaret's room. And as I walked up and I looked on each side, I saw yellow crime scene tape around the door. And nothing struck me about that. So I walked a couple feet down, again being escorted and held up. And there was a lot of crime scene tape around my door, and they moved it so I could get in. And there were people in there mulling around. And they asked me to look on my dresser. And I did, and all I saw was the black dust that they use for fingerprinting. And it was everywhere on my dresser. And I looked, and I couldn't tell if anything was missing. I could barely even see the dresser come into focus at that point. And my eyes followed down the wall to the desk. And then I went toward my bed. I remember Mama and I went shopping in December of '77 so that I could decorate my room in the sorority house. So that January, Mom and I went shopping and we decorated my room. I remember I had this beautiful white bedspread, and it had green leaves on it and just was happy looking. And it took forever for us to decide which bedspread I wanted for our room. So as I looked down the wall, I saw my bed, and the bedspread was all in a ball, and the blood on it was brown. because it had dried. And when I looked at that, I thought, wow, my bedspread's messed up. And the things that you think of in that situation, it upset me that my bedspread was ruined. And then I looked and concentrated, and I knew this is where it happened. And I knew I had been attacked and I'd been hit, and it happened here right on my bed. I think it helped put focus on what happened to me, that it really did happen and it really happened here. And I think later on, it helped me visualize that instead of making things up in my mind of what really happened, because I saw it and it made an impression, an imprint on me. And I think that was also a good thing to do. My parents didn't think it was, but they walked me back down the stairs and took me to the airport with my parents, and we flew home to Miami.
So what was your physical recovery process like after the assault?
When I was taken back to Miami and I moved into our little house, my injuries were severe. I had my cheek cut so bad, and my teeth were all loose, and my tongue was almost bitten off. But you can't fix your tongue. You can't sew it. It has to heal on its own. My jaw was wired shut, and it hurt so bad. My whole face just hurt. And a couple weeks after the attack, my parents took me to an oral surgeon in Miami to kind of check me over. And he found that my jaw had been wired shut incorrectly, that it would have been off. So 3 weeks after recuperating that much on my bones, he had to re-break my jaw and ended up putting pins in each of my joints. And my chin was so shattered that he wrapped wire around my chin so that it would heal. The bone would heal around the wire.
Oh my God.
So it was just hurtful. So the 3 weeks of healing I had went away, and I was wired shut again for 9 weeks to recuperate from my jaw.
Wow, Kathy. God, I can't believe. I mean, I know that doctors make mistakes and whatever, but to make such a mistake when you are already so physically and emotionally vulnerable, you are such an incredible person. Wow.
Well, I think the doctors in the OR that night, they did the best they could in the situation. And I think, they weren't oral surgeons. This was not what they usually did, is to wire. So, I mean, I understand that they weren't in a position to do it correctly. And then I didn't understand it when they had to break it again. It was I was kind of mad and then not mad because I understood, and then it hurt. So it just kind of went back and forth. And I don't blame the doctors in the OR. I mean, they did the best they could at the time.
Right. So, Kathy, when you were attacked, Ted had just recently escaped from prison for the second time. Considering he was capable of escaping then, was there ever a time that you felt afraid that he could come back?
No, I didn't. Actually, I felt very safe. Ken Casares was the sheriff at the time when Bundy was in Tallahassee. And I knew him to be very strict and very straightforward. And I knew he wasn't going to let Bundy out of his sight. Good. So I felt like the security around Bundy was pretty tight, and I did not have any fear that he would come out and get me again.
I would hope after that a second escape that Everybody in that jail would be watching him.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yes, and then some.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
indeed.
3 months after the attack, you took a job as a cashier at a lumber yard to overcome your fear of strange men. Friends have described you as being unchanged by the attack and have even described you as being the star on top of the Christmas tree. What was the emotional healing process like for you?
Well, it's interesting to be thought of as a star on the Christmas tree, because in theater we we did plays, and I was a star on the
Oh,
tree
I
for
love that.
a Christmas orchestra thing we did. So that was interesting. Play on
That
words.
impression stuck, I guess.
Yeah.
I felt that I wasn't really afraid of men. I think it was mentioned to me, aren't you afraid of men? And people were asking me kind of those kind of feelings. Then I started saying, yeah, I'm afraid of men. And it really didn't hit me at first that I was. So after my mouth was wired shut for about open, I'm sorry, when it was opened up for about a week and I could start talking again, the jaw was really stiff. So when it opened up, I had to work it and try to eat again and that. So a couple weeks after that, I did go to work at a lumber yard in Miami because I thought, where am I going to see the most men I don't know in the quickest and shortest amount of time? And so a lumber yard seemed that it was a good idea. I worked as a cashier, and I remember there was one time when someone kind of bothered me or freaked me out, and I slid underneath the cash register, and one of the other people back there took the sale. But everyone in the office knew my situation, and they watched me and took care of me.
Wow.
And after a couple weeks, maybe a month, I decided that I didn't need to be there. I didn't want to always work as a cashier in a lumber yard. And I felt that I was fine and I would be able to face and understand that not everyone was going to attack me. It was a one-time situation, and I was not going to continue my life being afraid of things every day. I didn't want to live like that.
And you mentioned that you never saw a therapist. Did you feel like it took a lot longer to heal, like all on your own, or did you feel like you were up to the job?
I never even thought of going to a therapist. My parents, we just never even talked about it. My mom was Cuban, and I guess it was just, I don't know, her thoughts or the way she was raised, but you just handle things and take care of things on your own. So I did. I was strong enough to know I wasn't going to hide, and I wasn't going to live in a box, and I would crawl and claw anything I had to do not to live in a box.
Are there any surprising ways that you're reminded of the traumatic event, like any lasting side effects you didn't expect that kind of pop up in day-to-day life?
The thing that I think of first is my medical problems. I have TMJ really bad, and I've had several surgeries over the years. And 2 years ago was my last surgery. And they go in and they work on insulating the joint and they don't break the jaw, but they dislocate it. So then I have to not be wired, but put back into position. My cheek is totally numb on this side. Every time I go to the dentist and they work on my mouth, it's so painful. And that's why I had surgery 2 years ago, because it just, beside the TMJ, and I wait to the last minute until I can't even eat a pea. Is that difficult that I do go and have surgery. And I think that the going to the dentist was just, threw me over the edge, and leaving my mouth open that long was hard on me.
Yeah. So you have not only survived a brutal attack by Ted Bundy, you've also survived lupus as a child, a bank robbery while working as a bank teller, stage 2 breast cancer as an adult, and 2 miscarriages. What has it felt like to process that all of these bad things could happen? How has this affected your view of the world? Do you feel like the world is an incredibly unfair place for you, or do you feel kind of invincible?
I don't know if either one is the way I would answer that.
Mm-hmm.
When my daddy died, I was 5, and we lived in Miami. And I remember he come home every evening and sit in his big leather chair, and I'd sit next to him with a Chinese checkers game in between us, and we would play until dinner time. And that was our ritual. He'd sit there with a cigar, and it was wonderful. That was what we did.
Yeah.
And I remember one day I stood and looked out the window, and Daddy didn't come home. And so dinner, progressed, and I went to bed. And then the next day I looked, and the next day, and Mama finally said, Daddy's not coming home. He's up in heaven with Grandpa. And I really didn't know what that meant. All I knew was that he wasn't going to come home, and now it was my brother, my sister, Mom, and I. And this became our new normal. This is what was going to look like every day. My mother remarried a couple years later. I was adopted by my stepfather, who was wonderful. He was a great big German guy, and he was just the best dad to replace Daddy that I could ask for. So now life's good. We have Dad and everything, so things are good in our life. When I was in 6th grade, I was always tired. I had a low-grade fever. I would sit and watch the other kids play next to the teacher, and didn't want to play, and went home, went to bed. So the doctor, the pediatrician my mother took me to, said, there's something wrong with her, but I don't know what it is. And I think she needs to see a specialist. This was the end of my 6th grade. And my mama took me directly down to Jackson Memorial Hospital in Miami. I ended up staying in the hospital for 3 months. I was sick. They weren't sure what was wrong with me, and they did all these tests, and they found out that I had systemic lupus. And systemic lupus is when it attacks your organs instead of just your immune system.
Mm-hmm.
And it had attacked my organs of my liver. My kidney.
Mm-hmm.
So they didn't know a lot about lupus back then, nor with me being such a young patient. They didn't know about it. It's usually an older woman's disease.
Mm-hmm.
And so after 3 months in the hospital, they told my parents I could go home because there was nothing else they could do for me. And they were told that I probably wouldn't live the year because they didn't know enough of what to do.
Wow.
So my parents were approached by a doctor in Cuba who said that she had a cocktail of chemo that she would like to offer to my parents to give to me. It was experimental. My mom and daddy at that point were, sure, try it, anything we can do. So I remember going down to Miami and getting my chemotherapy, and I lost all my hair, and I was sick all the time. So my 7th grade came up, and I was homebound. I stayed home, And the teacher came to me every couple of weeks and brought my homework. And Mom and Daddy, we had moved now to Fort Lauderdale. And Mom and Daddy worked in Miami, which was about a little over an hour to get home. And so I was alone a lot during the day, and I was sick, and I would look outside and see my friends play, and I didn't even want to go out and play. I just didn't feel well enough. So that was a long year for me, 7th grade. I was always lonely. I remember I would pick up the phone and dial 0 because I just wanted someone to talk to. So I would call the operators, say, "Hi, can you talk to me?" And sometimes they would say, "Hey, honey, what you doing?"
Aww.
You know, or I would ask a question from my homework that I didn't know the answer
Aww.
to. And
Aww.
sometimes they would say, "No, I can't talk," you know, and I'm like, "Okay, bye-bye." But so that was a lonely, lonely year for me. Toward the end of the year, I talked my parents into finally letting me go out because I just wanted to get out of the house. So I put on my prettiest dress, and Mama put a beautiful scarf on my head. We went to church, and we sat in the very back of the chapel, and it was so nice to get out. And then afterwards, we went and had ice cream. It was my mama, my daddy, and I, and then went home. And about a week and a half later, I came down with shingles.
Oh,
So now I am just no hair, shingles all over my face and neck. And I didn't want this to be my new normal.
Yeah.
I just wouldn't accept that.
Mm-hmm.
So I, in my 8th grade of school, I was allowed to go to my middle school. And then I went to high school in Fort Lauderdale at Fort Lauderdale High School.
Mm-hmm.
I could not go out and play or do a lot because of lupus. My system was very low, and so I couldn't do PE or anything. So I joined theater. I loved theater. I could act and do and be anyone I wanted to be, except that sick little kid who was homebound in 7th grade. I didn't have to be her anymore. I went away from her, and I was everything and anything else. The 4 years in theater were marvelous for me. No one knew my past. No one knew how sick I had been. It was, it was just me and as a freshman in high school. And I made a lot of friends. And Scott Rubin was especially a good friend of mine. And another one was Susie White. So I remember they stuck out as very good friends. When I was 34, I was diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer. I had no history of it in my family. I actually went to the gynecologist just for my yearly exam. He found the lump, which was very small, the size of a pea, when he found it. We decided not to do anything right away, just, let's see what happens. And by the time we did the biopsy, it had grown to the size of a walnut. And the biopsy showed that it was cancer. And we had made the decision that if it was cancer, just to go ahead and do the mastectomy. And I actually had a radical mastectomy, which I felt, I was take the arm, take the leg, just get it out of me. I just wanted to know that it wasn't going to come back. I was given chemo again. Lost most of my hair this time because when I heard chemo would be one of the way they were going to help fight the breast cancer, I thought, no, please, God, I don't want to lose my hair again. And that was one of the things, again, I thought about, other than, I could die from breast cancer, is please, God, don't let me lose my hair. And it seems like God has a sense of humor because I lost clumps of hair. So I did have it cut short, but I wasn't bald again. So when I had my chemo, I had 9 months of it. I was supposed to have 6, but it did last 9 months. And I would go in and I would have a chemo treatment, and then I would have 6 more. And I said, no, I have 1 more. And when I get through with that, I have 1 more. I didn't want to see the big picture. I just knew I could do 1 at a time. I didn't think I could do 6 at a time. So that helped me put it into perspective that I only have 1 more to go through. And that allowed me mentally to understand that this is going to be okay. So I was on chemo for 9 months, and a year or so later, my husband, whom now I had married, Scott Rubin, from high school at my theater department, and he and I got married, and we decided after the chemo that we wanted to have a child. So we did. I got pregnant, and in my 2nd trimester, I had a miscarriage. And there are so many women who go through miscarriages, and we all handle it obviously different. And in my mind, I can go through anything. I can do better. I can move on. But I couldn't help the little baby that was in me. I couldn't make it better. And that was very difficult for me to know that I wasn't in control of that. Excuse me, about 9 months later, we got pregnant again. I was in my 3rd trimester, and I had another miscarriage.
Oh.
And of course, I went through the same thoughts and feelings. I know other women go through this, and how they heal is so different. But in my case, again, I wanted to help the baby, and I couldn't. So after the 2nd miscarriage, my husband and I decided we're not going to do this again. I didn't want to do this again. So about 6 months later, we went and got a sailboat, and that became our new baby. That became something that we enjoyed doing, and it brought us together, and we shared it, and our son loved it, and so that was now our new life. That was going to be our new normal.
I love that.
Yeah, that's lovely. Do you feel like that attitude of like just taking it one day at a time and just like refusing to look at the big picture like helped you get through a lot of the things that you've been through?
I used to say the things I've been through. I used to say you have to run really, really fast because you don't know what hurdle God's going to put in front of you. And you have to be able to jump over it, the other side, and keep going. And as I get older, I say you got to walk really fast and look around the obstacle in front of you because there's got to be something better.
Yeah.
So I look forward to good things happening. The things that have happened to me, I just take them one at a time, and I get through it. And then something else appears, and I get through that. And then it's just the way I've always lived with lupus and being robbed at gunpoint, and it's just, there's been so much, a divorce and single mother for 5 years, and just get through it. You just you just get through that, and then there's something else that I hope that by my story can let people know, let women know that if they're going through a hard time, be it a bad divorce or whatever it is, that one of the ways I've gotten through it is I've looked deep inside of myself and found my strength. And I pulled it up, and I hold it. And that's my strength, and no one can take it away from me. And I've used that so many times. I've hugged on it and said, I can do this because I'm strong enough. And it might take baby steps to feel that strength or just to get by another day, but that strength is theirs and they have to learn to use it. And to me, that has helped me a lot.
Yeah, that's absolutely inspiring.
That's great. As a survivor of a famous serial killer, how do you feel about the ever-growing community of true crime enthusiasts? Is having an interest in true crime insensitive to survivors and victims' families?
That's a good question. I'm not offended by talking about it or listening to it, or I don't feel that it bothers me, because when you have a serial killer, that means you have multiple victims.
Yeah.
And they are what is the story. And by talking about the serial killer, on the other end of it are the victims and the families that are connected, even though it's not always brought up. I wanted to contact family members after the attack, and I was healing, to reach out to them, and I don't know, just say hello or reach out. And I know it had been many years since the attack, and I had recuperated, and I was feeling good. And I thought, if I went to their families and brought up this again, it would be like it just happened yesterday. And I just didn't want to cause that angst and that pain on them. So I never reached out and spoke with anybody. So I don't know how they would feel answering that question. I just know, I know that the bringing information about the killer also needs to be brought up in victims.
Yes.
Right.
So as someone that is now interested in true crime yourself, you've said that you've read most books written about Ted Bundy. Do you have a favorite book written about his murders, or is there one that stands out that just got it wrong?
Favorite book for me was Anne Rule's The Stranger Beside Me. I read that, one of my first books that I did read. I wanted to read about Bundy. I didn't want him to be this big scary thing. I know he was a man with bones and flesh, and then I knew what he was on the diabolical, homicidal, his other side. Yeah. And I needed to put those two together because I wanted it to be one thing. I didn't want to be scared of just the evil. And so I saw Anne Rule's book, and I read it, and it helped me heal. It helped me put something together with the evil. So I have read several books over the years, and there was another one by Kevin Sullivan, and it's called Murderous Mysteries, Ted Bundy. And actually, it really told a lot about the victims.
Oh.
So usually the victims in most books, if you look at them, have like a chapter, and that's it on the victims, the whole book. Wow. And that is so unfair. Yeah. Because each of those women that he killed, each one had dreams and desires and things they wanted to do the next day. And it's so important not to let their voices be lost in all of this. And I can't speak for them, but I want people to know that they were there and that Bundy killed them when they were in the prime, in their early lives, and looking forward to things they were going to do.
That's great. I'm going to check that book out. That's actually, I've read quite a few books. I love the Anne Rule book, but I have never heard of that book. And I'm
Yes,
going to check that out.
he actually wrote a chapter about me in the book, Kevin Sullivan. He's been very helpful, teaching me the way. And like I said, I only started this last year. So he's helped me, mentor me, and, kind of led me in the right directions. So actually, on a side, he and I were invited to do a seminar at in Dubois University in Pittsburgh. And I got to talk, and then he and I did a long table or interview together about his books, and also about my experiences. So I was very fortunate to actually be invited. It was Hunters Hunting the Hunted, and it was forensic something of law and order, having a
Right.
forensic scientist.
Right.
And I'm like, whoa.
Right.
So I've met some wonderful people being able to talk and do this.
Do you think that reading these books and having an interest in true crime has helped you regain your sense of safety?
I think it has. I never had any curiosity, or I didn't want to know or have an opinion on true crime until I was attacked by Ted Bundy. And then I learned it's a genre out there, and it's so interesting. The people who look at it and go through it, and, I just find it interesting, and it has opened me up to a whole area I didn't know about, and to meet a lot of people that help other people by, telling their story, and letting people hear them and help them.
Great.
How do you feel about sort of the darker side of this fandom? Fans of Ted Bundy himself, people who talk about how attractive they think he was, and like, how do you feel about when he and Carol Ann Boone got married, for example?
During the trial, I saw on television all the women who were treating him like a rock star, and it didn't bother me then because I was going through what I was going through. But when I think about it, I think that they were missing something in their lives. And I think they were connecting themselves to Ted Bundy because he was receiving all the attention that I guess they wanted also. And also there's that feeling that they could mother him and make him better. They could heal him, which is something I didn't think of until I heard that issue. And also they wanted to date, a bad boy. They wanted to, be with a bad boy, but they were safe because he was in jail, and there was, no way they could get together. So it was they didn't think about it, but it was a safe relationship, I think, for them.
I think you're right.
And as far as Carol Boone going, Bundy was very manipulative. He used everybody to his advantage. He wanted people to see what he showed them of him. He worked at a crisis center. He was a student, Republican worker. He was a law student, but he couldn't follow through with any of that. It was something he wanted to be normal with and show everyone, but he couldn't keep it up. It was just a facade. And when Carol Ann started seeing him, he used her. When you read about the accounts, and it's just so obvious that he used her to talk to people, to send letters out, to do his bidding, and she was oblivious to it. I think she just thought he loves me, and took it to that limit that he did marry her. And I think it was a farce, obviously, the way they did it. But also it was interesting because of the way they did it. But I just, he used her. And hopefully toward the end, she saw that, the way he treated her.
That is a very kind way of looking at that situation. Like, I'm so impressed with you. Like, you have definitely done some incredible healing, because I hear about these people and I'm like, who are these monsters? Like, what are they thinking? But you
Yeah.
are giving them a lot of like kindness and thoughtfulness. Like, that's great.
I don't want it to sound like the way I did my life and the way I healed. Everyone should do it that way.
Right.
And I don't want to come off as pushy, or I did this so you can too. It's everyone's different and everyone has a way of doing things. Mine helped me, and hopefully I can share that with people, but I don't want to come across as, well, I did it, you can do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't want to be a know-it-all and expect people to move on because I did. It's very important to me that I don't come across that way.
Well, I think you definitely don't, and it's really interesting for you to consider not coming across that way as well after all that you've been through. Like, that your focus is on that at all is amazing. So
Thank you. That's just always been something important to me, that I don't come over like that. I'm just happy that I can talk.
Yeah.
Well, do you have any advice to those of us that just want to be more aware and prepared to protect ourselves in potentially violent situations? Are there any precautions that you take now to make yourself feel more safe?
I am aware of my surroundings. And one thing I see women do and girls do all the time, they walk with their heads down on their phones and they don't know what's standing next to them. Women have to be aware of their surroundings. Even now when I walk down a street and I'm uncomfortable, if someone's behind me and I look and I'm uncomfortable, I stop and I lean against the wall and I let them pass. And if they don't pass, then I confront, what are you doing? Can I help you with something? And make face contact. And I have been very fortunate that nothing else has happened to me. But I think the biggest thing is to have knowledge and be aware of your surroundings. Also, something I never did was to take self-defense class. I think every woman should, and it's just something that we should look forward to, because you need to do it. You need to brush your teeth and you need to have a self-defense class.
Yeah.
Because if forever, if ever you're in a situation, you have to be comfortable enough to know how to get out of it. So I would definitely suggest that as well.
I love that.
Now, a lot of time has passed since your assault. If you could say anything to Ted Bundy, what would it be?
I can't say that.
Yes, you can.
There's nothing I can say that I think he would give a true answer to. There's, I can say, what the hell were you thinking? But you can't talk to demons. You can't get a straight answer. And he wouldn't give it anyway. He was so into himself.
Yeah.
I would say the normal, why did you do it? And just to know I wouldn't get a straight answer anyway. There's so much I'd want to say, but I wouldn't feel that it would do any good other than letting me say it. And, just moving on that way. But I've said everything in my heart that I could say. And even out loud, I've said a lot of things. So I don't know that I would ever even want to confront him. And not that I'm scared, I just don't think it would be, I don't think I would benefit anything from it. And I know he would.
That's very insightful too, because I feel like so often we are craving this closure that's completely unattainable, and we think, oh, if I could just say that thing, then I would feel better about all this. But you're probably right that you wouldn't, because he wouldn't own up to it. You wouldn't get a straight answer out of him. He never even fully
admitted his guilt till the day he died. So, that's a really sensible way of looking at it.
Well, Kathy, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your story with us. It's been such a pleasure having you.
Thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate it.